Yes. Good to have all of you here. Truly an honor and a refreshing moment for us. So we are beginning now, obviously. It's some 3 minutes past the time, so we'll just begin. So good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everyone, depending on where you're joining us from. Obviously, we have people joining us across the world. So the time difference, I'm sure it's already nights at some place and afternoon at some certain place, as well as morning from where we are. So it is a good welcome to all of you for joining us for today's very important webinar brought to you by the Africa-China Center for Policy and Advisory, the ACCPA, and sorry, yes. So again, am I audible? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Yeah. So as I was saying, this webinar forms part of a series of a project that we're doing called the Sino-African Green Finance Alliance. And we're doing this project with support from the African Climate Foundation. And for the benefit of those that are joining us for the first time, the ACCPA, the Africa-China Center for Policy and Advisory, it's a think tank, which is headquartered here in Accra, Ghana, of course, working across multiple countries in Africa in terms of the continent engagement with China. So what we do is that we're in the knowledge production and the policy, space, trying to help and see how African governments and African countries can shape the engagement with China to ensure it's a mutual benefit and alliance with countries' development goals as well as the continent's wide aspirations. So that's what we do as a thing. As part of the work that we do, we try to create a platform for engagement with dialogues like the one that we are having today. Some of our activities are in person, some are online, and sometimes we do hybrid. But today we are having this online dialogue on a very important aspect of the Africa-China relation when you talk about the green finance space or climate finance space. And I'm sure we are all excited about this opportunity and looking forward to a very insightful discussion. And the way it works, once I'm done with this introduction, I'll welcome 𝐊𝐿𝐿 Liu, who is a part of the ACCPA team. She's a policy analyst at the ACCPA. She's our moderator, and then she will take over and, of course, walk us through the next session of the webinar, where she will introduce our speakers and, of course, lead us through the discussions afterwards. And then, of course, there will be a chance for all of us to be involved in the Q&A session. I'm sure 𝐊𝐿 will give us more information about how she wants us to participate in this webinar. So on this note, I want to say a big welcome to everyone for joining us. And we're very excited that all of you are part of this webinar. And this webinar will be recorded and later will be made available on our social media through our YouTube channel. And we'll share it via our social media as well. So once again, welcome to all of you for joining us for today's webinar. I will then hand over to 𝐊𝐿. As I said, 𝐊𝐿 is part of the ACCPA team as a policy analyst. And so 𝐊𝐿 will take over and run us through the next phase of today's webinar. Thank you very much. So 𝐊𝐿, it's now your turn to take over. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Paul. Thank you for your inspiring opening. And my name is 𝐊𝐿 Liu, and I'm honored to serve as the moderator of today's session. I'm currently pursuing a master's degree in African Studies at the University of Copenhagen, and I bring several years of experiences working across Asia and Africa, and particularly in the private sector and within the context of China's Belt and Road Initiative. And today's webinar, titled Africa-China Green Finance, is scheduled to run for around 1 hour and 30 minutes. And We will begin with short presentations from our two distinguished speakers, each of whom will have 15 to 20 minutes to speak. And during the presentations, we encourage everyone in the audience to use the Q&A box to share your questions. We will gather those and raise them during the open discussion segment after all speakers have presented. We will then invite each speaker to share brief final reflections. And finally, we will close with the remarks once again from Mr. Paul, the founder of ACCPA. So with that, let's go ahead and meet our speakers, and allow me to introduce 𝐊𝐞𝐲 Climate Program Manager at Development Reimagined, working on China, African green investment, renewables, and critical minerals. So 𝐊𝐞𝐲, maybe you can say hi to everyone.
Yeah, thank you for the introduction. Hi, my name is 𝐊𝐞𝐲. I'm currently working at Development Reimagined as a climate program manager. Good to be here today.
And thank you. And Dr. Beth Kimathi, Director of Edenbridge Capital Limited and CEO of PETA Consulting, with over 17 years of experiences in MSME development and economic inclusion. And hello, Beth. Dr. Beth.
Hi. Hi, everyone. I'm happy to be here today and looking forward to a really engaging conversation. Yeah, this is a very right on time discussion that we are having today. Thank you very much.
And thank you. So now, without further ado, let's begin with 𝐊𝐞𝐲. 𝐊𝐞𝐲, the floor is yours.
And shall I share the PPT from my side?
Yes, I think that'll be ideal. Yeah, can do that.
Okay, hope you all can see my screen. Oops, now. Yes, okay, thank you for having me again today. And it's my great honor to have this engage in this webinar. And also I'm really looking forward to further discussion. And I won't introduce myself again, so we can just go straight forward. So for those who are not familiar with our organization is called Development Reimagined. It's an African-led, woman-led international development consultancy with headquarters in Beijing and offices in the UK and Nairobi, Kenya. Right now, we have 5 working streams: China, Africa, climate change, development finance, decolonizing development, and global trade. So what we are doing is addressing China, Africa topics, and also we provide several services to like African ambassador groups in China, UN agency, and also some of the foundation here. And we are quite a diverse team. We are not like woman-led team, but also we have team members from all over the world, including most of them are based in Africa. So for the narrow it down to our climate team, we usually do the data-driven, evidence-based research. So, and I think once we have, I think we have this climate strategy since 𝐊𝐞𝐲 in 2021. So we cover around from data collection and generating some of the reports. So as you can see from this timeline, we started as a quite broader overview of China-Africa climate change engagement, and then narrow it down to looking at like private sector investment in kind of like overseas diverse-led climate funds from China, and also to more narrow it down to looking at the environmental goods manufacturing, and also to generate some of the renewable energy briefing, and also to look at how China can supporting Africa to transforming it into a solar PV manufacturing hub. So I think not only for the research and the data collection, we, especially starting from 2023, last year, we are more focusing on promoting climate investment. So, which means we have kind of like climate investment promotion events happening since last year. And I think this is very general overview of our climate team. So maybe we can go just in depth about our topics to look at the green finance. I won't talk about like very general one that how China's green finance has been growing since 2000 and since like 𝐷𝐿𝐼 established. And I think like the fact is it is increasing since 2000, but I think more importantly, we can see how it's gonna change from 𝐷𝐿𝐼 8 to 𝐷𝐿𝐼 9, because as we know, in 𝐷𝐿𝐼 8, we have a like declaration from China and Africa on combating climate change. So like the data here, it's all using our climate action, China-Africa Climate Action Tracker. That is one of the public available resources with user-friendly tours on our DR website. You can just play around on our website to filter different kind of required like elements, and you can access the whole data in our website if you are interested after the webinar. So based on our tracker, we have collected 155 Africa like climate projects since 𝐷𝐿𝐼 8, and which means it accounts over 65.8%, and this percentage are all renewable energy projects related. So one thing that I want to mention now is, so in this kind of tracker, we categorize 4 like different elements and to filter them down to help us understanding what is going on between China and Africa on climate issue, and especially for green finance, that is renewable energy, climate friendly infrastructure, clean technology, and clean transportation. So which you can see the graph here is based on the data that we collect, we recognize there has been 40 gigawatts of renewable energy capacity growth in Africa since the projects we have. So one thing also to mention that the projects we are having in our tracker, some of them, they are just announced that they will, like, for example, maybe to implement 100, like 1 gigawatts in Africa. So the 40 gigawatts here means that if all the projects we collect has been fully complete, they will contribute 40 gigawatts of renewable energy capacity in Africa. And also for the destinations, like Southern Africa attracts the most projects covering 32.3% of the total. And Nigeria, Kenya, and Zambia are the top 3 destinations. And one thing also to mention, it is still now EPC are still a dominant like projects type from China in this tracker. But we also notice more private investment are tracked in our data, and this private investment really playing a very critical role. And like we can jump out of our tracker. So like why we still like want to compare 𝐷𝐿𝐼 8 to 𝐷𝐿𝐼 9. And I think 𝐷𝐿𝐼 9 just happened in last year, September. And we see there's a more details commitment in 𝐷𝐿𝐼 documents in 𝐷𝐿𝐼 9. And for example, related to clean energy, in previous time, it has mentioning 10 projects focusing on clean energy and green development. And now we have very clear mentioning about 30 clean energy projects. And also we see there's a clearly list of types of renewable energy types, including solar, wind, green hydrogen, green hydroelectric, and geothermal power. So which means we have more detailed clarification from 𝐊𝐶𝐞 documents, which is kind of showing a very in details progress. And related to green industrialization, previously it's only mentioning promote green economy, but no dedicated action plan. And right now for addressing the green industrialization, like China and Africa established a special fund for China-Africa green industrial chain. And this special fund, I believe, has issued one kind of financing to a project that is happening in South Africa on solar. So which we can see that now that the fund is actually running at this moment. And also like the 𝐊𝐶𝐞 action plan highlights building the electricity transmission infrastructure like under African Union Agenda 2063 framework. And also one important thing we notice is about the critical mineral cooperation. Like for example, previously it's only mentioning support expansion of industrial chains in the mining industry. But right now we see that it has a clear mentioning about upgrades the mineral value chain through the direct investment in refining and the processing sector to increase the value of industrial chains. So I think during the 𝐊𝐶𝐞, we also see a lot of bilateral agreements signed, and this is some of the kind of new, we collect this data from all the news and all the announcement, not only from the embassy, but also from the news. And for all of the projects, if they are fully implemented, they will contribute more than 720 MW of renewable energy installment capacity. And you can see that like Zambia, it's really very active during the 𝐊𝐶𝐞 period. And I think they received 4 projects during the 𝐊𝐶𝐞. But what is missing to achieve Africa's target? So as we all know that in like the first Africa Climate Summit in Nairobi, Africa countries released the Nairobi Declaration to announce that in 2030, like Africa countries should be increase their renewable energy capacity to 300 gigawatts. So, and we kind of do an infographic to use 3 different scenarios. So first one, it's about Chinese contribution as usual. And the second scenario is follow the Africans' own past growth. And the third scenario is China's speed in Africa. So for scenario 1, that we use the 2022 56 gigawatts data and use a tracker that we have done to see what has been going on since 2020 to 2023. And we get the increased percentage. And then we will see this is the Chinese contribution. And in 2030, we get the 2024 gigawatts. So for the scenario 2 follows Africa's past growth path, which means we use the data, we calculate, like we collect the data previously from 2000, and to calculate how's Africa's own growth on increasing renewable energy capacity until 2022. And then we use this in like percentage and then calculate the scenario 2, which is ending at 234.4 gigawatts in 2030. For the scenario 3, we use a Chinese speed during the past kind of 20 years and use that percentage to calculate if Africa taking the China speed, and then we get the number at 245.2 gigawatts in 2030. So which means these all 3 scenarios, even though we're taking the China speed, we know that China has been very very fast growing in during the past 10 or 20 years on renewable energy kind of development. But even though we take China's speed in the past, and it still cannot achieve 30 gigawatts in 2030, the target, but which means if Africa wants to achieve its own target, it means that it should be growth faster than China's, like the average growth rate over the past decades. And then I think we calculate that, which means Africa countries requires an average annual growth rate of 23.3%. And also for like what China has been supporting, China could be central to supporting Africa in achieving 75% to 82% of this overall goal. And I think if like Africa continent want to achieve 300 gigawatts, and it should be much stronger accelerate in projects delivery. So what are the opportunities for China-Africa green cooperation? The first one is continuing green finance to Africa, but with more innovative mechanism. So first of all, I want to mention first part is about the continued green finance, especially for the financing from the Chinese two policy banks, which are always linking to some concession loans that are happening in Africa. And also, which means this financing should be always linking to some mega projects, which is very important to address renewable energy, maybe a larger size renewable energy deployment and the infrastructure. And because this kind of financing will be very essential to address African needs to renewable energy sources. In the other part, we should also encourage Chinese private sector investment. So like I mentioned in very beginning that we have several climate investment promotion dialogues since last year. And some of the private company mentioning and also reach out to us saying they are kind of lack of financing, and which means that innovative mechanism, for example, through PPP or blended finance will be add some values to this kind of address provide some de-risk private sector capital to private sectors. And then also other kind of the tool like the green bonds and also carbon trading, also this kind of the tools should be kind of provide some new opportunities for both sides. And I think the second one is green industrialization, should be linking to environmental goods and critical minerals. And I think one important thing is we just need to go beyond just to increase the deployment of renewable energy projects. We should also focusing on to leverage Africa's own capacity of the local manufacturing of environmental goods and also the whole supply chain of the renewable energy projects. This including the kind of components, for example, solar panel that's used in the renewable energy project, etc. And I think we all also, another part is about the critical mineral. We all know that China has been quite very active in Africa's mining sector, and which means that instead of just raw material exporting, we should really encourage them to shift from raw material extraction to the local value addition. So we need to encourage the investment to the local processing and manufacturing. And I think this is quite important to make sure this investment is sustainable and also ultimately to support Africa's own green industrialization. Oops, sorry. The third one is we think from our previous experience and also conversation with some of the stakeholders, it's also a need to establish a collective platform for disclosure of ready to invest projects to narrow information gaps. So one of the reasons I mentioned is it's one of the DR colleagues visit Botswana and Zambia to a field trip. And also the reason why we do this trip is some of the business approach to us and mentioning that they want to expand their market in these countries. And do you know any like in detail projects? And I think we search online. Unfortunately, there's not nowhere that we can find projects available project information. So instead of just searching online, we just do the field trip to build the network at local. And through our conversation, we get some firsthand information. But through this experience, we realized that for some of the Chinese investors, they want to go to Africa to invest, but they didn't know which projects are good or bankable or like ready to invest. But for when we talk to some African stakeholders, they also mentioned that they are looking for some Chinese like investor, not only for China, but also other countries. And they didn't know like where can find them. So I think there's definitely have some information gap. And in order to close this gap, I think a platform should be quite necessary. And I think they can be done under the 𝐴𝐶PA framework. So I will just end my presentation here. I'm happy to answer more questions if the audience have. And thank you again for having me. Thanks.
Thank you, 𝐾𝐿𝐬. And I saw somebody already raised hands. And could you just please all of your questions in our Q&A box? So later on, we will have a section to discuss all the questions together. And now we are inviting Dr. Beth Kimathi. So over to you right now.
Thank you very much, Ying. If I'm pronouncing your name correctly.
Yeah, you're correct.
Thank you. I would like to share my screen, if you don't mind.
Yes, please.
Are you able to see my screen?
Yes.
Yes. Yes.
Okay. Okay. As I was introduced earlier and as I spoke earlier, my name is Dr. Beth Kimathi. I'm a director at an organization called 𝐻𝐻𝐻𝐻 Capital. It's a microfinance based in Nairobi that empowers people, empowers women, youth, young people. We invest a lot in lending to the marginalized people in the rural areas. And we are now very much focusing on sustainable investment and sustainable businesses that are focusing on mostly green energy, agriculture, and the sectors that are working towards sustainable growth. Sorry, just give me a second. I'm not able to move the slides. Oh, thank you. You've seen the next slide?
Yes.
You're able to see the next, okay, yeah. So that was the introduction of 𝐻𝐻𝐻𝐻 Capital, where I work as a director of credit, the lending bit. I want us to speak about the story of Africa and the kind of potential that lies in Africa. It is very much well known that Africa is home to 18% or 19% of the global population. The global population currently sits at around 8.8 billion, and we hold 18% of that. But unfortunately, the same Africa, we are talking about over 600 million people in Africa that still live without access to electricity, whether for cooking, whether for lighting, and over 900 million relying on firewood. You can imagine what kind of opportunity lies here for investments in clean energy for this population. We can only be able to come up with innovative solutions and products for the African people. Not forgetting that we hold we are one of the youngest population in the world. We are one of the youngest continents. Over 70% of most of the African countries' population is below the age of 30. This presents a very big opportunity for labor, for innovations, for markets, also for products and services that we can be able to come up with through green financing. Despite the great potential, and on the next slide, you'll be able to see of our solar energy, we have only been able to have only 1% of the global solar PV capacity currently deployed in the whole of Africa, despite the fact that we hold 60% of solar energy in the globe. And of course, not to forget that we have the highest extreme poverty rates globally, with substantial numbers living at below $1 a day. And this is not, I don't like looking at this as a challenge. I like looking at this as an opportunity, because even as we come up with solutions and as we come up with solutions, as we come up with products, as we innovate, we need to remember what are our strengths and what are our weaknesses as an African continent. So I'm trying to go to the next slide. My screen is hanging. Paul, would it have been better if you present from your
Okay, sure. Let me try and do that. Okay.
Or if you don't have it, I can still remove
No,
it.
Okay. Can you see my screen?
Yes, I can. Thank you. Okay, you can go to the next line. Thank you. Yeah, Africa is, I call it a wealthy continent, and it is a wealthy continent with a lot of potential for innovation in green financing. As I mentioned earlier, we hold 60% of the world's best solar resources. You think of countries like Egypt, you think of countries like Sudan. Despite the very minimal investment in solar panels installed in the world, in Africa, sorry. We also hold great potential for wind energy. I'm sure this is known. We have very many corridors for onshore wind potential. Hydropower, Kenya, where I come from, is one of the countries that has land in hydropower and geothermal energy. Most of our electricity and most of our power, especially in most African countries, actually come from these two sources of power. And some countries are now leading in green hydrogen, very great potential. And we have, as been mentioned earlier by the European Investment Bank, that we have potential as an African continent to exceed over 50 million tons per annum by 2035 in production of green hydrogen. Let's go to the next slide, please. Green financing opportunities in Africa. I want to give you a few examples, especially from my day-to-day work. We have, and I can give you examples of stories of people who have benefited or who are beneficiaries of green finance. And one name comes to mind of a guy called John, and he was running a barbershop in one of our towns called Kisumu town. It's a city. And one of the challenges that he experienced over time is unreliable electricity. And some of the many African countries have this problem, that electricity most of the time is not reliable. or assured on a full-time basis. So what did he do? He took a loan with us and invested in solar powered. He powered his barbershop through solar, both for lighting and for the services, provision of the services. And from a monthly income of over $1,000, is now doing over $4,000 per month because of just that investment. For me, I see a lot of potential, not only in large-scale projects, which are, of course, through public-private partnerships or through governments, but I also see a lot of potential on small-scale projects, which are designed and innovated for the masses, for mass production. And these are some of the examples. We have opportunities for off-grid and min-grid solar expansion. There are some models that have worked in Kenya. There's a product we call 𝐾𝐚𝐭. It's a pay-as-you-go. So you get the solar panel or you get the solar solution, whether it's a lantern or whether it's a lamp, whatever it is, and you pay for it. Remember, one of the challenges we face as an African continent is the poverty levels. But that does not mean that people don't make money. People still make money. It's only that we need to fit the solutions that we provide for them within their income levels. So one of the solutions that has really worked very well for the slum areas, especially in Kenya, and for the rural population who are most affected by lack of electricity, is the pay-go solar models. And one of them is what we call the 𝐾𝐽 in Kenya. And this has great potential because then the masses are able to access solutions, solar solutions that are affordable, that they can be able to pay for, or either on a daily basis or a weekly basis or on a monthly basis. And at the end of the day, they end up owning the solution. Electric mobility and transport. One of the most growing mode of transport in the African continent, unfortunately, or fortunately, is the motorbikes. In Kenya, we call them the bodas and the tuk-tuks. You can imagine the kind of pollution this causes to our continent on a daily basis. There's an opportunity for us to be able to invest in this sector and to be able to work with partners, especially Chinese partners, who are able to either work with the African countries to produce these products or these motorbikes in the resident countries, or import those motorbikes which are electric electric motorbikes or tuk-tuks. This will reduce our global and continental pollution in a very high rate, and also the costs. It will also reduce the cost of running them and provide economic empowerment, especially for our youth. Climate smart agriculture and irrigation. Africa's GDP is powered by agriculture. A third of Africa's GDP is through agriculture. So the solutions we provide must also be cognizant of what do we rely on. We rely mostly on agriculture for feeding our nations and also for economic sustainability. So solutions that can be able to give us climate smart agriculture, whether it's through irrigation, whether it's through production capacity, then would be a great welcome. And some of the examples I can be able to think of my country, Kenya. There are some Chinese companies that have invested in very large scale farming, egg production, aloe vera farming, and many other examples I'm sure can be sent and can be gotten from other countries. So there's a lot of potential in climate smart agriculture and irrigation solutions. Great affordable housing, as you have seen earlier, Africa has one of the highest growing population And of course, the young population. When you have a young population, there's potential to grow and potential to increase that population. So there is need for affordable housing and green affordable housing for that matter, both for low carbon building materials and also roofing materials. And we've seen a lot of investment also in that sector in a number of countries. Again, I'll give an example of my country, Kenya. And I'm sure there's a lot of investment in this sector. We cannot say to have met our demand for affordable housing because quite a number of people are still living in slums. Quite a number of people are still living in houses that are not really up to the standards that are supposed to be. Renewable manufacturing and local value chains, there's a lot of opportunity to invest in production, even of these solar panels, of any other green energy solutions, even production of these motorbikes we are talking about, tuk-tuks and all that. And we need to rethink and think of how we can be able to partner or collaborate or cooperate with the Chinese companies who have shown global leadership in this sector of manufacturing. 𝐊𝐤𝐿 talked about carbon markets and nature-based solutions. There's an opportunity for us to be able to partner there. And of course, the large-scale renewables infrastructure. I've started with the solutions that are scalable for masses and that people can be able to even buy. And also not forgetting what we can be able to partner with through the private public partnerships, hydropower, wind power, solar and solar powers in large scale. We have many examples in Kenya. We have the Turkana wind power generation plant. We have the geothermal power, and all these have been, there's financing and collaboration through Chinese government and Chinese companies. Thank you. Let's go to the next slide, please. Of course, when you speak about Africa and the great potential that lies in Africa, we cannot forget to speak about the barriers that exist and the risks. I think the next slide, I'll be speaking about the risks that exist when you're partnering with organizations in Africa and how we can be able to mitigate the same. There's limited access to finance. We have still not been able to provide affordable finance as a continent to our people. And that's the reason why actually organizations like ours, United Bridge, have been able to thrive in a market that has very many banks. In Kenya, we have over 44 banks, and yet the non-financial microfinance institutions, which we call them credit-only microfinance institutions and digital lenders, are over 450 now and counting. So that shows you there's a big gap, there's a big opportunity to be able to provide accessible finance, accessible and inclusive finance to our people in the African continent. Of course, Africa is perceived as highly risky, and I'll be able to speak about that in the next slide. Weak policy and regulation. Many countries have not been able to come up with the policies around green financing, sustainable financing, have not been able to come up with risk frameworks around that. There's lack of data, and I like what 𝐊𝐤𝐿 has talked about, lack of data and transparency. We need to be able to know which are these areas that are ready for investment, which organizations are looking for investments or partnerships, cooperation from global partners and especially China. Low institutional capacity. Sometimes our banks have not been able to structure financing of this type of products. Of course, these are new products, not very traditional concepts. So we need capacity building also for our institutions to be able to structure this type of financing. And of course, there are very few countries in Africa that have been able to come up with the green financial products. A country like Kenya, I think South Africa have been able to come up with green bonds. And this needs to be embraced also across Africa. Let's go to the next slide, please. Thank you. These are some of the risks and how we can be able to mitigate them. Climate risk, I think climate change is a global problem, and we need to be able to know how we can we have flooding problems, we have drought. Of course, drought also presents an opportunity for solar energy, but we need to be able to design the products, especially when you're talking about climate and smart agriculture, agri-tech technologies and all that. We need to be able to be cognizant of the risk that exists as a climate risk. Infrastructure risk, not many countries have been able to invest fully in grid upgrades, and that is why off-grid renewable solutions are one of the quick solutions to our electricity or lack of power problem. We can be able to reach the rural areas through off-grid renewable solutions like solar, wind, harvesting of wind power and all that. Then we'll be able to mitigate the risk of lack of infrastructure, which is a heavy investment. If it was to be fully, if every country was to be fully on the grid, then it is a very huge investment. But we can be able to take advantage of the off-grid renewable solutions. Governance risk, I wouldn't even want to belabor this. Not many countries, again, have come up with any green policy frameworks. And we need, as an African continent, to work closely together to support one another and to be able to come up with these frameworks, which make it easier for countries like China to want to even invest in projects in Africa.
And Dr. Bess, we may have 5 minutes so we can have more time for discussion.
Okay. Let's progress to the next slide. I don't think I have many slides left. Strengthening our governance, Africa's governance frameworks for green finance. Just last month or 2 months ago, Central Bank of Kenya, I'm giving this as an example, was able to adopt the Kenya Green Finance Taxonomy and Climate Risk Disclosure Framework, which now guides the banking industry on how they can be able to look at financing in those sectors. And there are very many ways in which you can be able to strengthen African governance frameworks by strengthening national and county project pipelines, harmonizing regional standards and reporting, promoting public participation and open data, as we have spoken earlier. Let's go to the next, please. Next slide. I think I've given most of these examples of how we can be able to partner and how we can be able to work together with the Chinese government and the China companies, which we are already partnering as a country, for example, with them, but there's opportunity to work with them as an African continent in providing so many solutions: clean energy, mobility and transport, climate agriculture, green manufacturing, infrastructure, construction industry, nature-based solutions and all that. I think I spoke about this earlier. You can go to the next, please. What is our vision? The vision for an African continent for just green transition. We are not looking for extractive investments, but collaborative investments. There's a lot of requirement for capacity building, access, of course, climate resilient and livelihood protection when we are doing whatever investments we need to be doing. That we educate our people, because sometimes lack of knowledge is what makes some of the investments fail. That we include them in the discussions and in the discussions and the investments that we are doing in green financing access. Next, please. And as I think 𝐊𝐿𝐼 has talked about, China is already a great player in the African continent. We have over 250 billion investment in 2023. And the reason why we, as a country, as a continent, we would like to invest or to work together to cooperate with the Chinese, with China is because of their leadership, their technological leadership in green industries, deep financial capacity for green projects, and I've given quite a number of examples in that area, and shared interests in South-to-South cooperation, track record in delivering very large-scale projects at scale, and shared interests and strengths. Next. I've given you some of these case studies of successful projects. I think I won't belabor this again. Solar irrigation for smallholder farmers. This is not just a discussion for big and large projects, but also projects that Kenyan companies can be able to work on in cooperation with the Chinese companies. And I believe there's a lot of potential to see an Africa that is greened, just like you can see on the photo there. Next. So what do we do? It's a big duty for African governments, and I think these conversations needs to progress. We need to have meetings and discussions with the governments in Africa so that they can invest in people-centered green policies, strengthen governance frameworks, including green taxonomies, carbon markets, and of course, we need to champion for regional integration for clean energy trade and manufacturing. As an African continent, we are still far from achieving this goal. And for China and other global partners, Africa, of course, is looking for transformative, equitable green investments and not extractive finance. Support on technology, because you're already leading in this, and co-creation of innovative products and solutions, considering the kind of challenges that the people of Africa face. Ensure transparency and sustainability and consent in all green investments. Final slide. For investors and DFIs, we need to de-risk and finance both mega projects and grassroots innovations. Prioritize inclusive models, like the PEGO example I gave you, building financial tools that reach women, youth, informal entrepreneurs, persons with disability, and all that. Support green finance, intermediaries across Africa. And for us, as the people, we need to also be cognizant of our businesses, what kind of So we need to also educate ourselves so that we are able to achieve this goal of not only greening Africa, but also being able to access this type of solutions that give us an opportunity to thrive as an African continent. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Beth. And thank you all for those insightful presentations. So now we are beginning with our discussion segment. So please, everyone, set your questions in the Q&A box. And now I will begin with a few questions for our panelists, and then I will open the floor to the audience questions. So I have questions both for 𝐊𝐼 and Dr. Beth. And for 𝐊𝐼, I have a question that the presentation states EPC are dominant, but private investment plays a role. What are the key constraints preventing significantly more Chinese private investment in African RE?
Yeah, thank you so much for this question. I think it's also quite an interesting one. For EPC, I think they're usually led by Chinese SOEs. And I think they receive funding from China's policy banks. And usually once an SOE receives the bid, and I think they will generate some subcontractor. And for the EPC, I didn't mean that private sector didn't play a role in this kind of EPC projects, but in the different ways. I think for EPCs projects, like I just mentioned briefly, like private sector will usually become the subcontractors. For example, there will be maybe like renewable energy equipment suppliers. And this is definitely something they engage in, this kind of renewable energy projects in Africa. So what I mean is more private investment, which means is private sector actually do the investment in the country. It has a lot and it's increasing since FOCAC 8, but one of the challenges is the lack of financing. So for example, one company reached out to us, they want to establish some projects in Zambia, but Zambia, it has an issue internationally related to that issue. So usually some of the banks, they may not be able to issue any financing when the company wants to do the projects in Zambia. So I think this is related to some of the risks Dr. Beth just mentioned about risks of kind of the like the country credit risk. But Zambia is only just one example. So for some of the other countries, say I think they, especially for more smaller company, I think they are just cautious about when they do the investment overseas. And since renewable energy, as you read the news, and I think it's very, very competitive, not only in domestic China, but also in Southeast Asia and now in Africa. So competition is also one thing. And for the investment, although we see a lot, but it still cannot deny that some of the Chinese private sector, they are still engaging just supplying the solar kind of products or maybe renewable energy kind of equipment. They just like come to the Africa country and then they left. So I think to keep the Chinese investor to invest in actually, like I said, the whole supply chain of the renewable energy and also environmental goods, that is still also quite a thing that the Africa country should also think about, whether they can provide some financing through the support from the Afro-Exim Bank and also other kind of the World Bank, etc., and also maybe collaborate with the Chinese banks. And also, I think that should be definitely think about the way to like provide a better environment for Chinese investors to invest, but also kind of just like let the Chinese investor have the encouragement to do the investment in the country. So hope I answered your question, and I'm happy to hear more different answers or insight. Thanks.
Thank you, 𝐤𝐤. And now the Q&A box is open. So please, everybody, if you have any questions, just put your questions in the Q&A box. And for Dr. Beth, you suggest a shift from extractive finance to transformative, equitable green investments. So what specific indicators would signal to African stakeholders that Chinese investments are truly making this shift? Dr. Beth, would you please to answer this question?
Which question? The same one that has been
let me repeat. You suggest that a shift from extractive finance to transformative and equitable green investments. So what specific indicators would signal to African stakeholders that Chinese investments are truly making this shift?
Thank you very much for this question. For you to be able to know whether you're making this shift, it has to be very open transition and open dialogues. You have to have conversations. You don't just take up projects to communities, for example, without involving people, hearing the people voices. There are some projects that have been stopped because of lack of inclusivity or conversations with the public, with the communities. There are many instances where partners have been global partners have been extractive, and I think we are moving away from this as an African continent, cognizant of the fact that not only do we need solutions, but we need sustainable solutions, solutions that don't bring harm to our people, but solutions that bring huge and immense benefits, not only to the people, but also to the environment that we live in. And one of the examples I can be able to give you is look at our motor industries, look at our transport industries. Yes, a solution like bringing in motorbikes that are powered by fossil energy or fuel have made or brought a livelihood for our people, the youth especially. But what kind of impact do these have to our environment? So such discussions and such solutions should not only be solutions that just bring a livelihood, but we need to think of the future of Africa. We have an advantage and an opportunity as an African continent to have immense resources. We have natural resources, we have minerals, we have huge forests, so also we also have huge deserts. How do we protect, how do we ensure the investments that we put in? And that's the reason why we're talking about coming up with these frameworks that make institutions, especially banks, development financing institutions, countries that invest in Kenya, be very transparent on what exactly is going to be the impact of the investment. And the example I've given of Kenya, the central bank has that framework now that all the banks are supposed to abide by. That for every facility you lend out, you need to be able to do this analysis to see what kind of impact is this loan, for example, going to have on the environment? What impact is it going to have on other people? What impact is this going to have? Is it going to be a positive impact on the person getting the money, but also a negative impact on the environment? So I believe in transparency, a lot of transparency when having those discussions, not only between the partners that are investing in each other or with each other, but also with the communities that these products or these projects are going to have an impact on. On top of transparency, we need those frameworks. We need to strengthen our frameworks so that even as Ying was talking about countries and why some Chinese companies would want to shy away from investing in some countries and not in other countries, in some companies and not in other companies, is because sometimes we lack, one, the technical capacity to structure these facilities and these solutions in the right manner, and to be open enough to discuss everything on the table, and to base everything on frameworks, on legal, not only just environmental frameworks, but also legal frameworks, and to know that despite the fact, I mean, that the countries that are being invested in are politically ready. I want to use that word, politically ready to receive this investment, to work with organizations, for us to be able to even scratch the surface on the kind of potential that we have as an African continent. We have to look at it from a very multi-sectored or multi-layered approach, because we have to look at what we need to do as countries in the African country to be able to receive funding or financing that is not extractive. What base do we need? Sometimes we get this funding that is extractive because we do not take time to lay down what our expectations are. Sometimes we can be a bit desperate, let me also use that one, to receive financing without actually looking at the potential of harm not only to people, but also to the environment, both air, the ground, and also in our oceans. So it is not a one-sided conversation. It is a conversation that I'm sure we'll be able to have, and we should be able to have, not only with the Chinese companies, with Chinese government when we are talking to them, but also with global partners, to be very clear on what our expectations are, so that during the structure of any financing, then we know that we are not causing any harm. So it's a two-sided coin. That's my take. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Bess. And we got some questions from the audience. And there is one from Mr. Chen. His question is, do Chinese companies have the plans to invest massively in the manufacturing of renewable equipment like solar panels and wind turbines in Africa in the next few years? So please, 𝐊𝐞𝐲, start from you. Maybe you can answer this question.
Yeah, sure. For this one, I forgot to mention in my presentation, but we already know several business just during our conversation. And I think we know one company has the manufacture projects in Zambia. They are manufacturing some of the components of the solar products. And we also know there's one company have a factory in Ethiopia. They are doing some very easy solar panel assemble. So I think just through these two examples, we already know that definitely some of the companies already doing this kind of local manufacturing, but so we can, but I think this is only some of the conversation and observation from the network we have, but we can definitely assume that they have more from Chinese business. And I think in the future, I will say yes, because solar, and I think solar is quite competitive in China domestically. And I think this solar company, they are always looking for some alternative ways to expand their kind of market and also want to gain some profit on that. Yeah.
And thank you. And Dr. Bess, do you have any insights about these questions?
Sorry, the one that 𝐊𝐿𝐼 has answered, whether Chinese companies have any intention to massively invest in manufacturing of renewable equipment. I believe the intention is there. Personally, I've gotten an opportunity to have discussions with Chinese companies and to travel to China. I was in China early this year in Beijing on a similar conversation of collaborations and cooperation on green financing, and the need is there in the African continent, and the Chinese companies and the government is ready. That's what I felt, and that's what I that from the conversations and from already what we have seen even in the presentation that 𝐊𝐼 was presenting, you can see the kind of growth in terms of investment that has already happened in the African continent. But as the African continent, are we ready for these investments? And for me, I would say yes, we are halfway ready, because we need to put in place not only one country after another, but as an African continent, we have to be very collaborative, and we have to look at it from a regional lens, to be able to put in place the kind of structures that are necessary for the kind of large-scale investment that is required for our continent, to be able even to scratch the surface. Can you imagine we have the potential of 60% of the solar energy in the world today, and yet only 1% investment has been done in solar energy? What does that tell you? That should be able to tell us, we just need to see where the gaps are, where the loopholes are, where the knots are not tied properly, then we can be able to attract. For me, I feel that China as a country and Chinese companies are really ready. But you know, for you to be able to, even if you're an investor, for you to be able to invest in something, there has to be frameworks. It has to be done through a particular frameworks, financial frameworks, legal frameworks, political frameworks, and they have to find a ready the need is there, yes, but they have to find a ready country for these investments. Already, so much is happening. There are many stories which have been told in different countries. Ethiopia has good stories. Rwanda has good stories of electric motorbikes and solar investments. Kenya has also good stories of geothermal power, harnessing of wind power in Turkana. We have now many companies that are working on installation of community-based solar panels, and also individual solar, the small scale solar. There are many stories that we can be able to tell, but we are barely scratching the surface. We are barely achieving the full potential of the resources that are available for the continent. And I'm happy with such conversations, because what it does, not only does it open our minds and for these conversations, but it also, for those who are able to invest in these resources, the potential is immense. For those companies that are able to partner and collaborate with other companies in China, there are very many opportunities, even for setting up manufacturing plants in our individual African countries. Yeah, so yes, I believe the willingness is there. The need is there on this other side. So what is a small missing link is just putting in place the correct frameworks that can be able to allow for these huge investments. But we are on the right directions. We are headed in the right direction. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Bess. And there is a question from Mercy, which is to the presentation of 𝐊𝐞𝐲. And it says, 𝐊𝐞𝐲 mentioned a collective platform for project disclosure. What would such a platform look like? And how can African governments and civil society better track and evaluate China-involved climate projects on the ground?
Yeah, I think this is a really good question, because when I put down like to have a collective platform, it's very, like personally, I feel like it's quite ideal, because like it is very hard to persuade all Africa countries participate in such kind of collective platform. But one way that we maybe like African side can have a try is especially leverage the role of African Union, or maybe leverage the role of the Africa Exim Banks. So they will maybe each country, they can like voluntarily to submit the available like projects to this kind of the platform, and saying which types of like by categories, which amount that like also like in which region, like sector, how much money they need for the project, etc. And that will be make open resources. And then each investor, I will say not only for Chinese investor, but also other investor can have an access to this kind of the platform, and they will just reach out to suitable countries to do the follow-up, for example, whether to request of feasibility studies or like any follow-up actions from there. And also maybe Africa Exim Bank, there can be also to a role to become a financier to financing part of the projects. And I think that is something that maybe is like can have a try. And how to evaluate Chinese engaged projects, what I say is because this kind of the platform is also like open for public, and also it's in other turn, which countries and which investor, including which companies, get the bid for the projects or kind of have an agreement with this project's owner country. They will also need to publish online, so open, transparent, so we can know that, okay, for example, this project in Kenya, it's got by a Chinese investor, which means that all people can kind of get a chance to know what's going on afterwards when Chinese investor receive the opportunity to invest in the projects. So yeah, I think this is just something I can think of at this moment, but it's definitely something that maybe as a consultancy and also a researcher, we can just suggest to some policymaker that this is something that we can try from African side. Yeah, that's my response.
Thank you, 𝐊𝐞𝐲. And due to time limitation, I will choose one of the questions as our last questions for both our speakers. And there's a question from Sylvia. She said, given the insightful responses from our two panelists, what are the key areas of governance that need to be prioritized to support the development and the implementation of green finance initiative in Africa? So maybe Dr. Beth, you can answer this question first.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
For me, I think one of the key governance areas that can be prioritized to enable green finance initiatives in Africa, one of them is policy consistency and long-term regulatory frameworks. Governments must be able to establish stable, predictable, and forward-looking green finance policies. Because some sudden shifts on these policies can deter investors. There needs to be very clear regulatory frameworks, especially around tax incentives, climate disclosures, and all that. There is also a very great need for strengthening interagency coordination. For example, when you think about investing in green financing, not only one ministry or one arm of government is ministry is involved. There is the Ministry of Finance, there's Ministry of Energy, there's Ministry of Environment, there is Ministry of Planning if you're talking about, say, construction projects. So there needs to be strengthened interagency coordination so that we can be able to establish sustainable green finance initiatives in Africa. And I talked earlier about transparency and putting together or putting in place transparency and accountability mechanisms. When you invest in some of these projects, it's very important to be very transparent on reporting on impact. How will you monitor the impact of that project? What systems are in place to be able, for example, if you're issuing a green bond as a country or a climate fund, what kind of governance systems have you put in place as a country to be able to monitor this, to be able to ensure these funds are utilized in a very transparent manner? Most of these discussions require contract enforcement and contract signing. So how are the legal and judicial frameworks of those countries? So this needs to be very well put in place and very clear to support investments and to give investors confidence to be able to invest in projects of this nature. And I talked about decentralization of government and community inclusion. There are very many green finance projects that affect land use, water rights, local livelihoods, that have an effect on these people in one way or another. How do we then have conversations with the communities that we are going to implement these projects in to ensure they are inclusive, they are causing no harm, and they are respectful of those communities to reduce resistance to those projects? And I'm sure you've seen in various countries there are a lot of resistance when you're bringing in new projects because of lack of involvement of these same people. Risk management, how do we manage the risks around these investments? What frameworks have we put in place to plan for financial regulation and all that? And also we have spoken this about data and knowledge governance, sharing data, managing this data, being able to provide verifiable data by both, not only by the government, but also by public investors who are putting in these investments. And just to add to that question, I want to answer also, how can you be able to be inclusive of women, of youth, of marginalized communities in conversations of design, during design and implementation of green projects or green policies? And this is a very key aspect of any investment. Because trust you me, you can put all the money you want, but if the people are not involved, and as we talked earlier, you remember that 60% of our population is the youth. That is a voice you cannot afford not to think about. So in terms of including them, we need to have inclusive participation during national climate dialogues, during policy forums. And some of the time they resist because of lack of knowledge. Being able to give them information and capacity building to understand what kind of impact some of these projects will have on them, and also to monitor those projects to ensure they are as inclusive as possible and they are causing no harm once again. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Bess. And 𝐿𝐸𝐞𝐲, do you have anything to say on this question?
No, all good from me. Thanks.
Okay, I still see a lot of questions are coming up, but due to the time limitation, I'm very thankful for everybody's participating in this question section. So you may follow our website and our social account to get more information and more webinars in the future. And now, as we begin to close, I'd like to invite each speaker to share a final takeaway or recommendation in 1 minute or two. So maybe start with you, 𝐿𝐸𝐞𝐲.
I would say just let's working together to like from each side, both from China and Africa, to close the information gap, but also to make sure Chinese investor find very good projects to invest, but also Africa side, they can reach out some good Chinese investors. So let's working together to have a more green, green kind of development in the future. Thanks.
And Dr. Beth?
Thank you very much, everyone, for participating and for this discussion we are having today. As I mentioned earlier, we need to have many more bold, inclusive discussions that are anchored on, collaborations and discussions on good governance, on how we can be able to unlock capital, how we can be able to unlock funding, how we can be able to change and align our policies and institutions and investments with the needs of the people and our planet. Africa is ripe. Africa is ready for investment. We have immense resources that can be able to utilize, we provide serious, immense resources, as I've mentioned in my presentation, and we are ready for investment, but we need to ask ourselves the question, are we ready to put in place the right governance frameworks? Are we ready to put in place the right legal frameworks? Are we ready to make our countries politically stable so that they can be able to encourage more investors? But I see a lot of potential for Africa, the African continent, for the countries in the African continent. I see a lot of potential in regional collaborations and regional discussions. And I see a lot of potential in making our people better and having these investments bring a lot of economic empowerment for the places, for the communities that we live in and the people that are in the African continent. So thank you very much. I look forward to such more conversations as we deepen our Africa-China cooperation in green finance. This is not only a conversation, as I mentioned earlier, for governments, for large institutions. It's a conversation for each one of us to be able to think about how we can make an impact, whether we are consumers or providers of these solutions. Let's now move this dialogue from discussions to mobilizing capital, to scaling innovations, to building governance systems, and to serve our countries and our economies to ensure there is economic development and climate justice. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Lovely meeting all of you. Asante, thank you.
Yeah, thank you again to all our speakers and participants. To formally close today's session, now I hand over to Mr. Paul Frimpong, our founder of ACCPA.
Yes, thank you very much, Elaine. Thank you for taking hold and of course running us through the last 1 hour and 25 minutes. We're very much grateful for your time, and also a special thank you to our speakers, Dr. Beth Kimathi and of course 𝐾𝐚 for joining us and sharing your perspective with us. From 𝐾𝐚 that gave us more data-backed research on ongoing research that they've been doing. Of course, we had very practical examples of on everyday life, what it means for money in finance and investment to flow into the green spaces and how we support small and medium enterprises in Africa. And those are very transformational, especially when you give the examples that you gave in Kenya through your firm. So we're very much grateful. We thank you for all the questions that came. I believe that all of us on this very dialogue has really learned a lot and of course shaped our perspective one way or the other. This session has been recorded, so after the webinar closes, we will prepare it and make sure it's available on our YouTube channel, and we further share it across our socials and email as well. For us at ACCPA, a very much privilege to have gotten the opportunity to host all of you on this very important dialogue. And in the coming days and weeks and months, you'll get to know more about some of the things that we do, the other platforms that we are creating. And of course, once they are ready, we'll share same with you, and hopefully all of you can join us and even expand the network of people that can share and of course join us in this kind of discussion. Thank you very much to all of you, and we'll come your way again soon with our next program. Thank you. All right, bye.